February 9th, 2023, Jefferson Parish deputies rushed to a family home in Harvey, Louisiana. They knew they were on a time limit after receiving a call on the department's message system from a man who was clearly on the edge. Him and his family had apparently been struggling, and they were ready to take drastic measures to end their pain, telling 911 once they arrived, his family of 4 would be dead. That call came in early that Thursday morning. Officers made it to the house just before 8 a.m., only to find the house in deplorable conditions along with a family of 4, dead. Unfortunately, that man kept his word, taking them out of the misery they were stuck in for years.
Deadly shooting that happened in Harvey.
They just got in a situation and it seemed like they couldn't get themselves out. Families, both his and hers, were both helping, but you know, what we could, but it just wasn't enough.
4 members of a family were found shot to death in their home in Harvey in an apparent murder-suicide.
And he said, quote, "We can't live like this anymore, and you'll find 4 bodies when you get here."
By 1 or by 2.
Tim Ragas' sister, sister-in-law, and niece say the family was dealing with financial problems.
They took it into their own hands, unfortunately.
Just knew that the house was falling apart. Thought nobody lived there, to be honest with you. They were in dire need. There was no light bulbs in the house, no.
Welcome back, darkoholics. This is the dark side of life, where I will be telling you some brutal stories. We must remember, these are real tragedies with real heartbreak. With that being said, let's go. In February of 2023, the parents of the Ragas family, Joanna and Tim, were in their mid-40s and living in Harvey, Louisiana. They had 2 sons living with them, 20-year-old Eric Thornblum and his younger brother Timothy, who was 13 years old. The youngest son, Timothy, was autistic, and according to the family, he couldn't be cared for by just anyone. He wasn't to that point socially, and he required special care. 20-year-old Eric was the biological son of Joanna, and Tim was his stepfather. With the scarce amount of reporting that has been done on this story, it's been difficult to find information about the brothers. According to Iris Hernandez, a teacher at the Jefferson Parish School District, 13-year-old Timothy holds a special place in her heart. He was a very kind, genuine kid with a warm heart. Although he was placed in special education, he never let that bring him down. He was proud, and he enjoyed times where he got to read aloud to his classmates, and his classmates were always supportive of him. As far as it seems, he was a great kid, and the same can be said for Eric. There is nothing to suggest different about them. However, it's guaranteed that the struggle their parents were going through affected the boys severely until it took their lives. The father, Tim, was a previous employee for the St. Charles Parish Police Department, but even knowing that, it's unclear why he quit or why he lost his job. It's not stated anywhere if Joanna was a stay-at-home mother or if she too was out working, but after Tim became unemployed, things really started getting difficult for the family due to that loss of income. It's assumed, based on the evidence and some notes that were left behind, that a multitude of problems just began piling onto the family, and it all started mainly with their financial problems. Both sides of their family were aware that they were in need of a little bit of help, and they were doing what they could to help them out. They just didn't know the extent of help they really needed. We also have to remember that times are not easy for a lot of people right now. With the way the world is, we live in a stressful time, and people are feeling the pressure. So for roughly 3 years, he wasn't working, and as far as I know, neither was his wife. The stress just continued mounting, with bills coming in, mouths to feed, and no income, until they got a break. Tim eventually landed a job and started working again, which probably gave them hope and a little bit of breathing room to make a recovery. Where this job was, I don't know, but unfortunately, it only ended up being temporary for them, as his wife ended up with medical issues and required him to be home to care for her and Timothy. This is when the pressure really started to build. soon coming to a boiling point. Throughout the end of 2022, up until February 2023, the neighbors of the family had all taken notice of the house and its condition. The neighbor that was directly across the street from them would describe them as a quiet family who would mainly just stick to themselves. Another lady who lived there and would frequently walk her dog past their home that was on Curtis Street said that it was clearly falling apart, it wasn't kept up with maintenance-wise, and she didn't even think anyone was living there. When I found pictures of this house, it's in a nice community and it does look pretty run down. Not long before 8 a.m., the 9th of February, the police department received that call from Tim. According to Jefferson Parish Sheriff Joe Lapinto, the message was short and to the point, saying, quote,
"The dog's in the backyard. We can't continue living like this. You'll find 4 dead bodies when you get here."
As soon as they got this, officers were dispatched to 1100 Curtis Street. They entered the home to find that the inside of the home was in far worse condition than the outside, describing it as deplorable, while mentioning that the trash had begun to pile up to about knee-high. It's clear that they were in dire straits, as they had no electricity and not a single light bulb in the house. All 4 of them were dead from gunshot wounds to the head. Eric was the only one found alone in a separate room, while Timothy was located with his parents in their bedroom across the hall. Initially, Sheriff Lapinto could only speculate whether the parents had planned to do this together, both killing their children, or if it was only one of them who did it. Once the coroner's office finished their report, according to a New Orleans website, it revealed that Eric and Timothy were murdered and the parents each committed suicide, taking their own lives. While putting this story together for you, the only evidence that we are really missing is the ballistic evidence from the scene. So as of now, we don't know if both parents took place in killing their children or if it was just one of them. Regardless, it's absolutely devastating that it came to this, and that they thought this was the only way out of this depressing situation that they found themselves in. Joe Lapinto would also state that there were some notes left behind, which is why he initially thought this could be a murder-suicide due to financial problems. They decided not to release those notes to the public, so we don't know what was written by the family. I can only assume these notes were just as dark and disturbing as that phone call, if not more. When I heard the family members speaking to the reporters, my heart broke for them. I just couldn't move past it for a while after hearing them talk, as they talk about both sides of the family doing what they can to help out. Yet, it just wasn't enough, and then it hits you. It's probably because they couldn't help out enough. One of them would then turn to the other family member, and she says, "We're gonna do whatever we can," in regards to burying their 4 family members. At that moment, my heart sank, and I felt horrible for them and their situation.
He wasn't working the last almost 3 years, and he did get a job recently, and he had to lose it because she was having medical issues, and they had an autistic son, and he had to be here to take care of him because he wasn't socially where a lot of people could take care of him.
They said they and Joanna's family were helping financially, but before going in the home today, they didn't realize just how bad it was.
Depression it's terrible. He couldn't pull himself out of the depression. Medically, she was going through some things.
They don't know how they're going to bury 4 relatives.
I have no idea how this is going to happen.
We don't know.
I just have no idea.
We're going to do whatever we can.
Like I stated previously, there really isn't a lot of reporting done on this story. A handful of news stations would show up to take statements and ask questions, but it just seems like they've decided not to release a lot of their investigation to the public. Maybe they will when their investigation is fully concluded and they have all the ballistic evidence, but I also have a feeling that the public won't hear much more about this case with how little information there is now. No matter how you look at it, this is a tragic situation, and the heartbreaking reality sucks that all they needed was help. When looking into the family, I basically told you everything that I could find, even trying things that I've never tried before, reaching out to a few of Timothy's teachers from his school district, unfortunately with no response. The fact is, no one deserves to go through this much pain and suffering until your only option is kill your entire family so they don't have to suffer either. With no electricity, no lights, no trash being picked up, and all the bills still coming in, it had to have gotten so bad for it to have come to this. Many neighbors who heard the news were devastated when they found out why this happened, as no one in the community was aware this family was in such need, and maybe if more people were aware, people could have helped. It's also clear that Tim and Joanna had been trying to make a comeback from these depths. That's why he went out and got a job. You wouldn't do such a thing if you were strictly on a destructive path and you weren't trying to better your situation. When Joanna had medical issues forcing him to lose that job, that just piled onto the depression that he was suffering from, according to his family. A depression that Tim was just unable to pull himself out of, trying time and time again, but he just couldn't do it. The last thing that I want to talk to you guys about is how these things happen. We already talked about their financial stresses and events that led them to this point. In the last video's comment section, we talked a bit about group delusion, which doesn't tie in much here, but it really got me thinking. Granted, they were under a lot of pressure and going through a really tough time. Mothers and fathers, naturally, are supposed to love, protect, and care for their young ones. It's astonishing that not one of them said to the other, maybe we should leave the kids out of this decision and give them a chance at life. They were both extremely young with a long life to live ahead of them, and now their family will not get to see that. Eric Thornblum, like I mentioned, was the stepson of Tim. So imagine how his dad and his family feels about this. He was only 20 years old and just starting to discover who he was. A GoFundMe was set up for the family to help them with the burial of their 4 family members, with the goal of raising $4,000 just to get them through the services. Thankfully, last time I checked, they had raised over $11,000 with the fundraiser. We must remember that this was just a normal, loving family who at some point hit a rough patch and everything started to fall apart for them. Their problems continued to multiply until it was just too much for them, and they took the most devastating measures possible. As Joe Lapinto stated, it looks like financial problems and stuff have led to a destitute situation, and they took it into their own hands, unfortunately.